Hello, I'm Rick Stivers, and I'd like to welcome you to Young Martin's Reels. Today, we're going to be taking a look at this Garcia 3000 spinning reel. And what we've got is a reel that is going to take a little bit of troubleshooting today. If you wind the handle, you hear that? And if you try to raise the bail, you can't. Okay? So, I think I already have an idea what's wrong with it. I believe that what's happened is, I think someone took this bail apart and they got it back together incorrectly. See the locking tab down here? That's in a totally wrong place. It's locked underneath the bail to where you can't get in there and can't rotate it, can't lift the bail up. And by being locked down there, it's kicking inside here on the trip release. That's what that click is. It's hitting that trip release. So we're going to take this apart, hopefully repair the bail, get it back together, disassemble the reel and lubricate it, get it all back and running good. I hope. That's the plan anyway. It had a badly bent handle. I've already straightened that. And we're going to take it from there and see where we get. Anyway, it's the Garcia 3000. All right, to say that this one kicked my tail is an understatement, to say the least. The biggest problem I had is when I went to stretch the spring and put it back on, it shot out. And I was unable to recover it. I don't know where it went. I haven't been able to find it. So I had to make a new spring, and I'm getting pretty good, apparently, at making springs out of piano wires. But one of the problems that I encountered with this is I kept setting it over here where the trip release is at. I kept trying to reset the bail over there, and I was having difficulty because that's right where it resets. Instead of bringing it over here where it belongs, and then it works just fine. Okay? So as long as you set it up like it should be, it's tripping just fine. Now we're going to tear this reel apart, clean it, and put it all back together, and I'll show you the little spring that I made. I need to tighten up the center of it just a little bit. If you look, it's just barely not getting into the head. There's a groove around this head that spring's supposed to fit into, and I want to tighten that up so that it fits all the way into that groove all the time. So, let's finish taking this apart. Okay, we have our crosswind block out. We have our main gear out. We're going to go ahead now and take off the spool. We're going to disassemble the bail, not because you should, because you shouldn't. But I'm going to do it because that's my modus operandi. That's what I do, is I take things all the way down so that people can see how to put them back in the event that they end up with a reel in a basket. Grandson brings Grandpa the reel and says, I took it all apart and I can't figure out how to put it back together. Well, in that case, that's when you need to see how everything goes. So we're going to take these two screws out, which is holding in this retaining plate. The retaining plate is holding in this bearing. Ooh, she don't want to come out of there. Does she come out the other way? Nope. It's pretty corroded up in there. We really need to get that bearing out so we can lube it up good. I mean, it's there, it's functional, but it's a loud bearing. Hear that? Do you really want to listen to that all day? So unless I can get that bearing out of there, And then I got to decide, do I want to try to find a replacement for it? There are places out there that you give them the measurements for the bearing and they'll tell you whether or not they have one. There's a lot of old stuff down inside this pinion gear. And I've got to make a determination whether this reel is worth the trouble. It's not a high-end reel to begin with. It is a probably 1960s, 1970s reel. So we're going to have to evaluate all of these parts and make that determination. Is it worth the trouble or not? Okay, I have determined that this reel is not economically feasible to repair. However, we're going to continue on with the servicing of it, and then I'll just turn it into a parts reel when we're done. Here's what's wrong with it. This bearing in here is corroded, and it makes it very, very noisy. Listen to it. Is that repairable? Yes, it is if you could get the bearing out, but the bearing is frozen in the case, and I imagine with a lot of soaking for a few months in some solvent, you could probably get that to dissolve out of there. Maybe even some vinegar would do the trick, and we get it to come out. However, this is maybe a $5, $10 reel at best, and the bearing's going to cost me more than that to go try to order one. So I'm going to turn this into a parts reel. But that doesn't mean I still can't show you how to service it. So in the event that this bearing did come out, the pinion gear would have come out the backside and we could lubricate it and clean it. I've cleaned it all right here in the location where it's at. And we're going to go ahead and lubricate it. And we're going to get it all put back together. So let's go ahead and put some grease on the pinion gear. And I realize that it's pretty pointless because of the condition of that bearing. But I'm going to go ahead and put some grease in that bearing just to try to quiet it down a little bit. It's incredibly noisy. And I don't know anybody who could stand to fish with that all day long with it making that kind of noise. So yeah, it's still, even it's packed with grease, it's still not going to make it much quieter. All right, so the next part we're going to put back on is this bearing retainer, which does more than that. It's more than just a bearing retainer. It is a combination bearing retainer and ramp for our bail. There, you're gonna get it on this post right here. Once you've done that, you should be able to put the two screws back in it. Okay, with that installed, we can come back and put our rotor back on. And I'm going to tell you not to take the bail assembly apart. I know that I've been taking them apart, but on this particular one, because of the difficulty I had with that bail, with the trip spring, we're just going to leave it in place, especially since it's going to be a parts reel. Very noisy, isn't it? All right, but will it trip? Yes, it trips just fine. All right, let's see if we can get the rest of it put back together. Next part we're going to install is going to be our axle shaft. And it's nice and clean and pretty. We're going to put some oil on it and slide it in. Like so. Okay, go ahead and move the shaft all the way to the back. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and lubricate our main gear. And again, we don't need tons of grease on here. Okay, flip it over and install it, facing downward. Okay, that's good. Let's go ahead now. And this is our crosswind block. We've got to get it installed. It's going to go down where this wraps around like so. But at the same time, you've got to get it to go in this shaft back here for your axle shaft. So move the axle shaft up enough to be able to get that to slip on. Now, one thing I've forgotten to do here, let's go ahead and do it now, is this needs to be lubricated. Like so. Not a lot of grease, just enough to allow this to slide nicely. Okay, put it in the axle shaft, move the axle shaft up enough to get that to slip on. There we go, like so. And now we're going to lubricate this side of it because it's going to be rubbing against the case over here. This pin is going to ride back and forth in this track right here. So we're going to go ahead and lubricate that track. Like so. And we're going to put some grease on that. Now granted, this is just a parts reel at this point, but if it's your reel and it does have a good bearing and you do want to keep using, now actually you could go out and fish with this reel. This is going to be a perfectly functional reel, but it's just going to be really noisy. And I personally wouldn't want to fish with it. But now I'll tell you, if it were my grandpa's reel, then yeah, I might very well go out and fish with it all day just being that noisy. But it's not my grandpa's reel. So that's why I'm turning it into a parts reel. Somebody out there has one of these and needs parts for it, contact me and we'll see what we can do about getting you parts. That's what these are for. And anytime you see a reel, I go out and I find these reels and I purchase them simply for the reason of creating these videos. If you see something on one of my videos that interests you, that you have an interest in and would like to have, by all means, contact me. We'll see what we can work out. If you're in the lower 48, if you live in Canada or somewhere else in the world, shipping is just way too expensive these days to see about trying to move it on like that. But if you are somewhere in the lower 48, it can be done. Okay. Let's put this screw back in the other side. And that, unless I tell you that I'm planning to keep a reel, then you can pretty much count on I'm planning to get rid of the reel when I'm done with it. So I have buckets of reels sitting around here that I'm trying to move on. And I did manage to get rid of those Mitchell 300s that I had the other day. I've still got some, but I kept some of the better ones. I moved out the ones that weren't worth much for parts reels for a guy out in San Diego. There we go. And again, the only reason these reels are here is to do these videos for the most part. Unless I tell you, like that Mitchell 300, I have no desire to move that one on right now. But not the 300, the 302. But I do still have quite a few 300s that I would move on. I've got, now most of these Shakespeare spin casts, I'm keeping those simply because I like the way they look sitting on the shelf. Will I ever fish them? Probably not. But they are just really such pretty reels that I've got quite a few of them. I plan to move some, but for the most part, no, they're going. All right, let's see what we can do with the drag system on this, or even if it has a drag. It does. All right, there's our spring. We want to make sure not to send the spring flying. So I'm going to use my ice pick that I use. Okay, don't go too deep with it. There we go. That's the spring up out of there. Now let's see what we have in here. This is one of these that looks like it's going to have to press out from the bottom. And I just broke it. Now it's really apart. But this thing is all corroded. That's why it's not coming out. Look at this. That stuff is just corroded. I'm going to go ahead and knock it on out. Now it turns. Finally. Wow. Yeah, it's corroded up in there pretty bad. All right, you can start the hate mail now. I have managed to completely bust up this Garcia 3000 when I really thought it was going to be a pretty easy fix. The drag system, that is all corroded, so there wasn't much hope for that. This central bearing is shot in this thing, so it's so incredibly noisy. However, the gear train in this thing, the handle, the bail, all of that works nicely. So if you have one of these and you need any of those parts, I think I can set you straight. But the rest of this reel, no sir, it's going in the parts bag, marked Garcia 3000 parts. So that's it for today. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you dislike it, I understand, because I did kind of destroy some things. If I had been a little more patient, maybe I could have gotten this off, but that was just really rotted. It was not gonna do well. And it was a pretty spool until it got corroded inside. And the bearing, yeah, I'm not gonna do for that either. So if you have one of these though, I've got you back to where you can put it all back together. And I'm gonna suggest you leave the drag alone if that center section doesn't come out. And I can't seem to get it out. You might want to just spray some WD-40 on there and shoot a little bit of oil down in there and leave it be. It doesn't look like it's likes to be messed with. So I've got a good knob. I've got some good parts here, but the rest of this thing, anti-reverse, does it work? Yeah, anti-reverse works great on it. So all those parts, the axle shaft, all those things are good. What's bad is the front bearing. The pinion, of course, cannot come off of the bearing, so would have to be considered bad, as in for not for parts. But the gear train is good. The Crosswind Block is good. The handle, it's got an excellent handle on it. It's got a good bail on it. And if you're interested in any of those, great. If not, that's okay too. For now, that's Rick Stivers with Young Martin's Reels, signing out.